Hey guys, it's Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. Picture this, you're riding down the trail and you hear a twang come from the wheel and now your wheel's suddenly rocking from side to side as it's rotating. Chances are you've broken a spoke. In today's video, we're going to teach you exactly how to fix it. So what is a spoke and why would you need to replace one? Well, if we look at a wheel like this, we've got a bunch of different aspects of it. We've got the hub, we've got the rim, and then between them, we've got these little pieces of metal here called the spokes. The spokes are crossing over each other. There's some on both sides of the hub. If you were to break one spoke, it means that the wheel might not be perfectly straight. So as you're riding, it might be rocking from side to side like this, which means the bike's not going to track where you want it to track. It could also just make lots of noise, as it's spinning around, it could be smacking onto the frame or the fork. And worst case scenario, it could get caught in the frame or the fork and just completely lock up the wheel. That's going to cause a crash. So it's very important to replace any broken spokes. So what do we actually need now that we're ready to replace that spoke? Well, to be honest, there's only really one thing that we need, and that's the spoke key. When we look at spoke keys, they'll usually come in sort of a group of different sizes because the size of the nipple can be a little bit different between different spokes. If you can't see the nipples on the outside of the rim, that means that they're probably inside the rim, and you're going to need a slightly different tool for that as well. It's still a spoke key, but it's just for internal nipples instead. Two main types of spoke. We can look at these two here. We've got this one here, which is called J bend because there is a bend that looks like the letter J. And this one here is called straight pull because it pulls straight. 90% of wheels will have J bend spokes. These straight pull spokes are more common on the high end racing sort of wheels. But at the end of the day, they're both a solid piece of metal that's pulling a bit of tension onto the rest of the rim. If you already have J bend, you have to stick with J bend. If you already have straight pull, you have to stick with straight pull. You can't swap and change with these two. At the other end of these spokes here, there's a thread on the end of both of these here. That's what's going to thread onto our little nipple here. The nipple is pretty much I'm going to call this like the nut. It's got a thread inside there and there's slightly different thread pitches for different spokes. So if you can, try and make sure that you get the same size thread and then it will just thread straight onto there. The length of the spoke is very specific to the millimeter. So you need to make sure that you've got the right spoke ready. When we're measuring what spoke we're going to need, I like to rest the wheel up against the wall and we're measuring from, in this example, it's a J bend spoke, from the actual bend where it actually goes into the hub all the way up to the rim, sort of bending the ruler down so that we're following the exact path of it and just going until it's sort of just poking into the rim there, which for this one, I'd be saying looks like 265 mil, or 266 mil even, because it's usually in increments of 2. So now you're ready to go to your local bike shop and tell them, hi local bike shop, I need a 262 millimeter spoke. What was the number I just said? 266. And ask them for a 266 millimeter J bend spoke. As soon as you say that, they'll know exactly what you mean, and they're probably going to charge you, depending on the color, somewhere between like $2 and $2.50 or something like that. It won't be very much. Spokes are not ruthlessly expensive. Step one to replacing your broken spoke is actually removing your old one. Now to get there, we actually have to take off the tire and tube. So we'll start by doing exactly that. I can already tell you're going to put a timer over this. All right, tire and tube off. Now I've also got some rim tape here, so I'm going to need to remove that. Sometimes if it's a loose rim tape, you'll just be able to grab it with your fingers. If you can't grab it with your fingers, you can grab a little prick like this, find the valve hole, and we're just going to put it in there and sort of lever it out if it's a little bit too hard to grab just with your fingers. Cool. Now the wheel is completely naked. So now that we're ready to actually remove the spoke, we've got the male part and then the female part. All we're going to do is unthread them from each other. Now the nipple is actually the part that we're going to be spinning. The spoke's going to be sitting completely still. So we want to be able to undo that spoke, and I'm literally just going to undo this the whole way. And now that's loose enough to do with my finger. And now I've got the nipple all the way out, which means that the spoke is now completely disconnected as well. Now, a slightly confusing part when we're undoing the nipple on here is that it might not necessarily be the whole righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. The thread is the correct way that a thread would normally be. It's not a reverse thread or anything like that, but you might be looking at it upside down, as in looking at it like this instead of looking at it like this. I try and think of having like a screwdriver on the outside of the wheel and you're tightening or you're loosening. But remember, you're turning the nipple, you're turning the nut. That spoke is now sitting completely loose. It's not connected to any nipple at all. we're just going to move it however it needs to go. And you can be pretty harsh with these as well. They are a pretty solid piece of metal. And then we're just gonna slide it straight out like that. And now we've completely removed the spoke. There's two different wheels on the bike. You've got the front wheel and the back wheel. If we're replacing a spoke on the front wheel, it's really straightforward. If we're replacing the spoke on the rear wheel, I often say, regardless of what side it is, be it drive side or non-drive side, we pretty much always want to remove the cassette first because we've got to bend the spoke and twist it and it's quite difficult. So if you're doing a rear wheel, remove the cassette. Now, if we look really closely here at the hub of the wheel, we can see that we've got spokes coming into the hub and we've got spokes coming out of the hub. They alternate one after the other all the way around. So work out which one is missing. Is the spoke that you're replacing, is that coming out of the hub or is that going in the hub? Because that's quite important for the whole relationship of the entire wheel. I can see on this one here that we've got heading out, heading in, heading out, heading in is the one that we're doing here. Now, when I put this spoke through, I don't know if you can see on the back side of this wheel for where I'm aiming, I'm trying not to get through either of these triangles. I'm trying to get into this big piece up here so that when I push it all the way through, I'm able to then lift it up. Whereas if it was stuck in the triangle, I wouldn't be able to lift it up. Just a little top tip that I've learned over the years. These spokes are all going to crisscross over each other. We can see all these, it's crossing over so many different times. What I say is the one that I've just replaced, you can see it sort of jiggling on the hub there. That's the one that we're replacing at the moment. If we look at one next to it, which is the, well, two next to it, I suppose, the next one that goes into the hub. If I look at that, I can see it goes underneath this spoke, and then it goes over the next one. So I'm going to do the same here. It's going to go underneath this spoke, and then it's going to go over the top of that spoke. So with a little bit of brute force, I'm just going to push it across to wherever it needs to go. So now I can double check my work. It goes under, over. I'm lucky on this budget level wheel that this one actually has the single wall rim. By that, I mean, I can pretty clearly see the nipples right here, so I can't really lose them anywhere. If you've got a double wall rim, transferring the spoke across can sometimes be a little bit difficult. So I want to teach you a tip that I've learned over the years. I've been replacing spokes for a decade and I've lost so many nipples into the rim. So I'm going to teach you how to not do that. If you grab even your broken spoke would be great, or just in general, a spare spoke that still has a bit of thread on the end, all I'm going to do is thread that onto there. It doesn't need to be far, just enough that we can sort of get some purchase onto it. And I'm actually threading into the top side of the nipple here, so the incorrect side of the nipple, because I'm going to be putting that, where is it? There it is. Because I'm going to be putting that through this way. And then that's what's going to help me line up the nipple onto the thread of the new spoke. So I'm just going to use the nipple that's on this old spoke here, and I'm just going to push it straight through. And as I tighten this spoke, all that's going to happen is it's going to thread into the nipple. But I want the nipple to turn. So I'm going to try and turn it with my hand a little bit. If I can grab it down here, that would be excellent, which I can just. And I'm just going to start that thread on the spoke as pretty much as far as I can with just my fingers before having to use any tool. And now I've transferred that nipple across. I can take this spoke and I don't need that anymore because now it's all connected and ready to be tightened. Now we're ready to true the wheel. So this is where you'll use your trusty little wheel true stand, or perhaps your zip ties in the fork at home to be able to tighten it up. If you want to know how to actually true your wheel, we've done another video further back on our channel explaining exactly how to do it. It was actually, without sounding too cocky, I think it was actually a really good video and I think you could learn a lot from it. So I don't need to go into it too in depth here. Today's video is more about how to replace the spoke. To briefly explain what I mean when I say wheel true, I mean all we're going to be doing is tightening and loosening some of the spokes on both drive side and non-drive side in relation with each other to make sure that we bring the rim back to central. If I spin this, it's surprisingly good, and it should be a lot worse than it is given the fact that one spoke's incredibly loose. Nonetheless, I would be doing a wheel true here because I can see that there's a little bit where it goes off to one side and it's just not quite perfect. So that's what we're going to do now when we're doing the wheel true. Perfect. And now we're ready to put the wheel back onto the bike. Well, not actually. We've got to put the tire, tube and rim tape back on first. So let's do that now. All right. Rim tape. We're lucky here that this one was just a simple rim strip rather than rim tape. So all I'm doing is lining up the actual valve hole with the valve hole, and then I'm just stretching the rest of it around and making sure that it's not folded over itself like it is. And really important part here is to make sure that you can't see any of the nipples. By that, I mean the rim tape might be sitting a little bit to the side. If you can see one of the nipples, it means that the tube is highly likely going to poke into the nipple while you're riding, and you'll get a flat tire while you're pumping it up in the morning. Pump it up, put it back in the bike, go for a ride. Now that we've got our new spoke in and our tire and tube are back on and we're ready to put it back in the bike, this is where I'll say a quick disclaimer. Now that you've put a brand new spoke in, be prepared that it might make a little bit of noise. The noise could be something like where these spokes are crossing over, it might make a little bit of noise as you're pedaling around. That means you might need to tighten it, or it might just simply be the bike bedding into place. It's nothing to stress over. It's a bikes make noise kind of noise, so no stress. But also they might begin to loosen themselves a little bit after the first ride. And this is because everything slowly beds into place once you've been test riding the bike. In the wheel true stand, you can't put your body weight through it, but when you're out on the trails or the roads, that's what can really sort of shake it down and sort of bed everything back into place. Now you can put the wheel back in the bike and head out for a bike ride. Hopefully you've learned everything that you needed to about how to replace the spoke on your wheel. Again, if you want to know a bit more in depth about how to do a wheel true, we've got a video a bit further back on our channel about exactly how to do that. And again, I don't like sounding cocky, but I think it was a pretty good video, so go check it out. Otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching. I hope you learned lots. We'll see you in the next video. See you guys.